Angela Dawson was born in 1968 and was named Jeffrey Allan Dawson by her parents. She testified that she was born intersex, but that she was assigned the male gender designation at birth, at her father's insistence. She says that since her teens, she has identified as female. Miss Dawson says she had a difficult childhood and was abused by her father as a child. She says that she escaped from her abusive home at around 16 years of age. Miss Dawson has limited education. She has never graduated high school and reads at a grade 6 or 7 level. Miss Dawson said in an affidavit that she is not violent or aggressive by nature. However, her criminal record shows that she has a criminal history with the police for violence, offensive weapons, B&E, theft, drugs, fraud, sex, other criminal code offenses, failure to attend, and arson. So, I don't know what they mean by sex crime there, if they mean sex trafficking, sex working. It just said sex. I guess in the article. So, Miss Dawson went to an apartment building at 269 Yonge Street in Winnipeg in late February 1991, where she beat a 60-year-old man to death over a 3-hour period behind some money that was supposedly owed to Miss Dawson by the victim. As such, Miss Dawson was also convicted of manslaughter. Years in a male penitentiary. So we have a very uncommon situation. So you have this infant, it's born intersex. So my understanding is it's in between male or female, and the dad says, well, just do the surgery to make, they're like, we'll give you the surgery, but it's either to be make a male or female if you're getting the surgery, or you could just leave it. Or she says, well, make him male. It's my son, you know. But maybe he's thinking, hey, it's a man's world, you know. I don't know what he was thinking. I got, you know, whatever. I don't know. What do you do? It's literally, it's kind of a coin toss. So he goes, man, apparently this is a woman, and it's kind of hard to argue it, because most people have their opinion one way or another, but it's like, literally, she was born in between, so it kind of was, you know, different. Now, what else is going on that's a little bit odd is that on the birth certificate, this is a young man. In those times, in the early 90s, there's a violent incident. At this point, they're identifying as a woman because it's past their teens. And the victim is stabbed and it seems killed, 64-year-old. And so you're being sent to prison, and you're being sent to men's prison, but you're living as a woman. So Miss Dawson says she was raped several times during her incarceration. While incarcerated, Miss Dawson says she was diagnosed with gender dysmorphia and she began hormone therapy. When Miss Dawson was released from prison, she was released in British Columbia. She says she came to BC because of the availability of gender reassignment surgery through the gender dysmorphia clinic there. So Miss Dawson lived with a number of chronic physical and psychological conditions. Miss Dawson testified that she loves to direct traffic. She says that she directs traffic at busy intersections, including Main and Hastings, Broadway and Commercial, and Broadway and Cambie. She says she began directing traffic after she saw a fatal accident between a truck and a pedestrian. She says she likes to help people cross the intersections and feels that her role in the community is important. So she's like a self-appointed crossing guard in my apologies, in BC, um, Vancouver. Um, I guess she saw somebody get run over. The area she's talking about. So Maine and Hastings. So I guess it depends on what side of Maine, but anytime Hastings, you're like you could run over somebody. It's damn near zombie land. Let's just call it what it is. So I think it's a good thing. Directing traffic. There could be anybody laying in the middle of the street down there and stuff like that. So it is important. So while directing traffic, Miss Dawson always wears rollerblades and often wears big headphones and brightly colored clothing. She testified that rollerblades are her primary method of transportation. She describes her rollerblades as her life, wears them everywhere. She claims to be a very active and athletic person and says physical activity helps her manage. So virtually all of the VPD who work in the downtown East Side testified that they know Miss Dawson and they know her as someone who likes to direct traffic on rollerblades. Usually they have spoken to her about the safety of her actions, and some of them issued tickets to her. So she's known, and I mean, you can do your research. Like, a lot of people know who this lady is. Not many people know she's from Winnipeg and how, look, I don't know, maybe this is a typical Winnipegger. I I don't know everybody, but I feel like a very unique situation and she's known colorful character. But that one, no. Colorful character. I don't know why I twisted up on that. Miss Dawson received care from Ravensong Primary Care Clinic, a medical facility that specializes in the treatment and care of transgender people. Ms. Dawson worked with community home care nurses for over 2 years in order to get one of the chronic conditions under control. She was very motivated to do so as her gender reassignment surgery could not occur while her other conditions needed treatment. So we're kind of skipping around. So, alright. Miss Angela Dawson from Winnipeg killed somebody in Winnipeg. Definitely went to prison for that. Did not sound like it was a great experience. Got out, is being taken care of by this clinic. Ravensong is a clinic for transgender people, such as herself. And she likes to rollerblade around in traffic and direct traffic or whatever it is. So, born an intersex individual. We're getting into the medical side. So, she was very motivated to do so because her gender reassignment surgery couldn't occur with her other conditions needing treatment. So she was facing other chronic issues that was slowing her gender reassignment surgery, I guess. Miss Dawson received medical care from a physician from the downtown community health clinic. The physician was her family doctor, responsible for treating the chronic conditions, and then she was also responsible for referring Miss Dawson to home care support to help her with cleaning, laundry, and grocery shopping. There were nurses on her Ravensong care team, as well as the doctors who specialize in the care of transgender persons. He was responsible for prescribing Miss Dawson's hormones and treating any complications that may have arisen after her gender reassignment surgery. In early March 2010, Miss Dawson traveled to Montreal for her gender reassignment surgery. A registered nurse accompanied her from Ravensong. The surgery, also called a vaginoplasty, involved using Miss Dawson's male genitalia to create female genitalia, including a vagina. The surgery is a very delicate procedure and can only be performed by a highly skilled physician. So, she is getting her gender reassigned medically. So in Canada, you're understanding the scope of resources that can go into just one person. And it's, collectively at the taxpayers' expense. But it's also not easy necessarily, I guess, to get qualified for some of these situations. She has another ailments and so disabilities, I suppose. So it looks like she got specific instructions by her doctors and nurses in Montreal not to show her new vagina to any males. It's an odd instruction, but there is no corroboration for this claim. Almost 2 weeks after the surgery, when Miss Dawson returned to Vancouver, she was escorted home by a male nurse from Ravensong. After her surgery, Miss Dawson received daily medical care and assistance from the community home care nurses who had worked with her before to help her manage her chronic conditions. 2 particular nurses were responsible for most of Miss Dawson's post-operative care. Over the course of her post-operative care, male home care nurses visited Miss Dawson on occasion. The evidence was that a female nurse always accompanied male home nurses. Miss Dawson testified to turning unaccompanied male nurses away and not choosing their treatment. As noted, there are very specific personal care procedures associated with post-operative care for gender reassignment surgery. Adherence to these procedures was necessary to keep the surgical site clean and prevent Miss Dawson's new vagina from closing. One of Miss Dawson's nurses testified that following the care regimen was important because the healing process takes up to a year, and the success of the surgery depends on maintaining the vagina the way it was formed. Therefore, it is critical to keep the surgical site clean and avoid infection. Maintaining the vagina in proper form requires lifelong maintenance. This includes dilating the neovagina with specially designed instruments on a strict schedule. So, I'm not even qualified to unpack some of these things, honestly. But this one, my understanding is that, obviously with any surgery, you don't want to get infected or you'll die. That's just number one. There's a high risk of infection after any surgery. That's part of your insides being opened up and where they're not usually supposed to be. So anything could fly in there, and that's the medical side. She seemed very resistant to men at this point, or being around men, but maybe there's many women who just prefer not to have male gynecological nurses or whatever the case. I don't really see that as a major issue for any woman or any. I think somebody should just. I don't think it's it's, I guess, a double-edged sword, sorry, because if you're choosing the genders of people based on what, I don't know. But she wasn't comfortable with it, and I understand why somebody might not be comfortable with it and whatever. And then, so you don't want to get infected, and there is a glass tube that you need to basically, I guess my understanding is leave in there. Kind of at least, put in there to keep it from closing back up. Now, I don't know what the surgical vaginas are like. I've not gone with that. I'm not hating on anybody. I only know the OG. So but my understanding is on the ones I'm familiar with, there's not really a requirement to do that. So there's definitely differences even after you get like the surgery. It's not like just planted, it's installed, like you're doing a swap out. Like, oh, I just LS swapped or something. You just slam an engine in it. It's definitely like not just start the key and go. All rules apply for the same. It's like you got your own specific lane that you got to move with this. So the post-op care seems to be a very, very important element of the success of the procedure. And so they got a device that's specifically designed and it's on a strict schedule. So one of the community home care nurses testified that it involves inserting a long tube-like instrument called a dilator into the vagina and leaving it there for a period of time. There are different sizes of dilators that are used at different times during the healing process. Dilations are necessary to keep the vagina open and to help it heal. With the correct length, girth, and depth, stopping dilations could result in loss of the vaginal canal, which would be irreversible without further surgery, such as a skin graft or a bowel transposition. Missing dilations could result in an infection that could also compromise Miss Dawson's healing process. The nurse also said that nothing other than a dilator can be used to dilate. Miss Dawson was required to dilate 4 times per day for the first month following her surgery, plus perform other procedures to keep the area clean and free of infection. But by June 2010, Miss Dawson was required to dilate between 2 and 3 times per day. And Miss Dawson claims that her misgendering by the police arises from systemic discrimination. So what am I talking about? What? Misgendering by police? Yeah, we're gonna have to get to that. So Ms. Dawson argues that the lack of police training provided to officers and others acting on behalf of the Vancouver Police Board is part of systemic failure on the part of the VPB to ensure that it does not discriminate against trans members of the community. Specifically, she argues that it forms the backdrop that has enabled Ms. Dawson to be subject of repeated instances of discrimination on the basis of sex, including, most fundamentally, failing to recognize and treat her as a woman. She argues that in light of the absence of any training or policies on how to deal with trans members of the public in a respectful and non-discriminatory manner, it is not surprising that the attitude and conduct of individual VPB members run the gamut from entirely appropriate to offensive. I don't know. That was a lot. You know how the government and politics gets when they gotta put something out there, just saying, look, we did this and we didn't do that, but we did it and we didn't do it. So some people did it, but most of us didn't do it. Of course, some people did it. It wasn't done. Like, I don't even know what they're talking about, but at the end of the day, Miss Dawson is basically making the argument that these people fucked up when they picked her up. And they didn't respect what she was trying to do. And so she has a general allegation framed as, I've received tickets stating that I am a male, even though I'm clearly post-operative transsexual woman. Many times when Ms. Dawson made complaints to the OPCC, she identified her misgendering as part of the reason for her complaint. She was arrested and jailed on 2 occasions, and ultimately the way that Ms. Dawson received medical treatment in the jail amounted to discrimination. So, this is what we've kind of been hearing, like, well, she directs traffic, some of the cops know about her, some gave her tickets. I guess people gave her tickets. Some of them didn't gender her correctly. I don't know if that means you can beat the ticket. I don't know. I've heard fighting a ticket, it's kind of, you're encouraged to fight them. I don't know. As far as I'm concerned, I don't know about no ticket. I never heard of the ticket. So, like, whatever they're talking about. I'm not involved. But for those that's got the tickets, my understanding is just take the ticket, shut the fuck up, and like just shut the fuck up and take the ticket for your ass really get in the clink. Now she didn't subscribe to that. Maybe they put the wrong gender on it. She kept it going. Whatever. They arrested her. They don't generally arrest people for rollerblading around and directing traffic, but on a couple occasions she did get arrested, and she felt like it was discrimination because she needed to undergo her post-surgical treatment and it wasn't taken seriously. There was no real effort made to accommodate her needs, and no evaluation was done by anyone in the jail as to whether such accommodation would amount to undue hardship. So the complaint of Miss Dawson concerning 6 incidents of discrimination by the VPD was dismissed, except for a complaint concerning the medical treatment she received while incarcerated. And so VPD kind of got clear of it. Because they kind of quote a bunch of cases basically, and the VPD ceased the contraventions and refrained from committing the same or similar contravention. VPD takes the sum of bans as damages for injury to dignity, feelings, and self-respect. So they hit her off 15. Okay. What do we think about the number? So the cops giving her the wrong name on the ticket, she got 15, basically, is what that sounds like. Because VPD said, look, we'll be careful. We didn't mean no disrespect. How about 15 thou wow? And she's like, yeah, we'll do 15 on you. But the jail situation, we're not talking about 15 for what happened that. So she's already got 15. Now, apparently, like, they've basically funded her case against the jail. And said, we don't have nothing to do with nothing. So it's interesting because not all government is the same, like, branch and everything. Like, they sometimes have to cover their own self. So you see it sometimes, like, even in the U.S. or something, Trump might be like, oh, I had nothing to do with it. They fired. Like, because you're the like, you gotta sometimes just remove yourself from whatever. And, so VPB or whatever, the police board said, far as we're concerned, we made a mistake. Here's 15 bans. Alright, so that's going to be part one. We know she got hit off the 15. Where are we headed with this thing as far as what happened in the jail? Like, what happened? We'll get to that in part two.